Well, good morning, Branch fam. I know it looks really dark where I am. I'm recording this not in the morning. Um, but happy last week of Advent to all of you. Man, it seems like the season has really just flown by us. Um, it's crazy to think that we just started and like Christmas is here. Here it is. We're here and we're ready to go. Um, I hope that you've been taking time this season to prepare your hearts, to prepare your minds for Jesus and for the coming king, for the birth of the baby in the manger. That's been a very stark image in my mind this year, is this infinite cosmic being that we call God, beyond even a cosmic being, yet also somehow this baby in the manger. Yeah, very cool juxtaposition that happens there. Yeah, gets into deeper stuff, but that's where my mind has been at this week. Um, just a couple of really quick reminders for all of you who are watching this online. First off, we have our branch Christmas party tomorrow evening. We're gonna be like 5:30 to 7:30. So if you would like, please show up. We'll have some snacks, we'll have some games, we'll hang out. It'll be Christmassy. It'll be a lot of fun. But we hope to see you there. Hope to party with you a little bit. Um, Also, just remember that this is our last Sunday school lesson for the next 2 weeks. So December 26th and January 2nd, we will not have Sunday school on either of those days. And then next week, December 26th, we will also not have branch service because we're combining the celebration service. But then January 2nd, we will have branch service. And then moving forward from there, starting in the season of Epiphany, we're going to keep going as we do. And also, just as a reminder, for those who are watching this, if you're watching this as it's coming out live, we are currently meeting right now face to face, and I would love to be able to chat with you a little bit, be able to pray with you a little bit, as would the rest of our branch family. So we hope that you'll consider joining us. Just let me know and I can send you the Zoom link to join us for that. But with all those things, I think that's all the announcements that I have. So with all those things, Christmas Eve service is coming up on Christmas Eve. Duh. We're gonna start at 6. We'll go like 6 to 7. If you want to read or lead us in a song, let me know. That's all of it. All right, let's get into what we have for this morning. So we've been doing a small series on Advent words and word studies. And so this last week, we come to the last word of Advent, and it's this word that everybody knows but is notoriously hard to define. It's the word love, right? And I mean, there have been songs written about it. I know I've joked about the songs that are written about it before, like, what is love? How do you actually define it? You know, where do you go with it? How do you do it? You've probably heard sermons before where pastors will pull out the slightly different Greek variations of love, where you have phileo and you have agape and you have eros. And people like to play with those distinctions and stuff, but if we're going to try and define love as a whole concept and its whole biblical understanding, how do we understand love? What does love look like, and how do we know when we're dealing with it? And so I want us to watch this Bible Project video, and then we're going to ponder this idea of love together. We're going to read a scripture, and then hopefully our hearts and minds will be ready as we move into the sermon this morning. So let's watch this video together and see if we can come up with something about what love actually is.
So, if you've heard of Jesus, you probably know about one of his famous teachings called the Golden Rule. Do to others what you would want them to do to you. And this, actually, is a restatement of something else that Jesus said, that the meaning of life is to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Now, that's really beautiful, but what does he mean exactly by the word love? It's an unclear word in English, because you can love your mom and you can love pizza. And if the word love means the same thing in both of those cases, your mom's gonna feel real bad. So what did Jesus mean in his language? Well, first of all, this love your neighbor phrase is a quotation from the Hebrew scriptures, where the word for love is ahava. However, the language Jesus spoke and taught in from day to day, it was a cousin language of Hebrew, that is Aramaic, in which the word for love is rachma. But then, as Jesus' followers spread his teachings around the world, they translated them into Greek, using the word agape. But here's what's fascinating. The earliest followers of Jesus, who wrote the books of the New Testament in Greek, they didn't learn the meaning of agape by looking it up in ancient dictionaries. Rather, they looked to the teachings of Jesus and the story of his life to redefine their very concept of love. So one time, Jesus was asked about the most important command in the Jewish scriptures, and he first quoted from the ancient prayer in the Torah called the Shema. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart. So love for God is the most important thing. But then Jesus quickly followed up by saying another command from the Torah was also the most important, to love your neighbor as yourself. So which is the most important, loving God or loving your neighbor? Jesus' answer is yes. To ask the question means you don't get his point. For Jesus, they are two sides of the same coin. Your love for God will be expressed by your love for people, and vice versa, they're inseparable. And so this makes it clear that for Jesus, agape love is not primarily a feeling for someone else that happens to you, like our phrase, I fell in love. For Jesus, love is action. It's a choice that you make to seek the well-being of people other than yourself. Jesus also went on to teach that genuine love for God and others means seeking people's well-being without expecting anything in return, especially from people who are in difficult situations, who can't repay you even if they wanted to. According to Jesus, this kind of generous love reflects the very heartbeat of God. And he took this even further. Jesus said that the ultimate standard of authentic love is how well you treat the person that you can't stand. Or in his words, you shall love your enemy and do good to them, expecting nothing in return. For Jesus, this kind of enemy-embracing love imitates the very character of God himself. Now, we wouldn't be talking about Jesus still today if he had only said things like love your enemy. This is how he actually lived. Jesus was constantly helping and serving the people around him in very practical and tangible ways. And he consistently moved towards poor and hurting people who couldn't benefit him in return. He showed love for the forgotten ones, the people who usually fall through the cracks. And when Jesus eventually marched into Jerusalem, he made himself an enemy of the leaders of his people by accusing them of hypocrisy and corruption. But then instead of attacking his enemies to overthrow them, he allowed them to kill him. Jesus died for the selfishness and corruption of his enemies because he loved them. After Easter morning, Jesus and then his followers claimed that it was the power of God's love for the world that was revealed in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. As the Apostle Paul put it, God demonstrated his own agape for us in this: while we were still sinners, the Messiah died for us. Or in the words of the Apostle John, God's own agape was revealed when he sent his one and only Son into the world so that through him we could have life. And for John, then, this leads naturally to the conclusion, beloved ones, if that's how God has loved us, then we ought to show love for one another. So Christian faith involves trusting that at the center of the universe is a being overflowing with love for his world, which means that the purpose of human existence is to receive this love that has come to us in Jesus and then to give it back out to others, creating an ecosystem of others-focused, self-giving love. And that's the New Testament meaning of agape love.
Love the Bible Project. Always love the stuff that they do. So we've heard this word love. We've talked about it a little bit. Again, there's some slight distinctions inside of it and inside of how we use it. But what is, as we move into the season of love and as we think about, this foundation that's been built for us through the Bible Project video, what is it that allows love to be so impactful and so powerful? And I love the example that he used when the New Testament writers were writing in Greek and they used this word agape. Like, they didn't go to a dictionary to try and define it, but rather they looked to the teachings in the life of Jesus in order to define what agape meant, what it looked like, and really how it's supposed to be used. And I think that's a great example for us to follow, and not just looking to the life of Jesus, but in looking to the teachings, the life of Jesus as recorded in the scriptures, all these different things in order to help us define and understand what love actually is. So I want to read this short passage. It comes from First John chapter 4. And here's what First John chapter 4 says. It says, "You are from God, little children, and have overcome them." This is the worldly people. Because greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. They are from the world, therefore, or they are from the world, therefore they speak as from the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God. The one who knows God listens to us. The one who is not from God does not listen to us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. Beloved, let's love one another, for love is from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, because God is love. And by this, the love of God was revealed in us, that God has sent his only Son into the world so that we may live through him. And this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. So it's this really powerful passage, right, about how God is love, and if we are meant to be loved, then we need to do the same as God does. And really, like, if you claim to know God, then this is something that like you have to do and you have to have. It's very essential and it's very crucial. But what is this thing, love? Again, we're sort of circling the drain here. But I think one of the most fascinating and probably one of the most important things about love is the idea that it is immanent. The idea that it's about presence, it's about a beingness or a being with, right? And this is what the early Christian authors were so drawn to with this person of Jesus. As they started musing about his divine status, they started thinking, okay, if this really is God among us, then God showed his great love for us by, yes, going to the cross and dying for sins, but also, as we celebrate in the Christmas season, for coming down out of the divine plane and entering into our own human plane, right? Like God came from up here and is now down here. The universe was built differently, or it was thought of differently in those times, where you had like the human plane and then you had God's plane above, and then you had the plane of the dead down below. And so there's this idea, right, that God descends down. God condescends is not quite the right word, but that's literally what it is. Like God makes God's self known and reveals God's self to us. This is why the name Emmanuel is so powerful. It's a Hebrew phrase that literally means God is with us, or God with us, as you probably know. And I think this right here is where love really finds its strength, really finds its force, right? Because we all have probably had experiences before where somebody has told us, oh yeah, I love you, or I have love for you, or something like that, but they don't ever show up, right? There's no being, or there's no presence about them that is like, yeah, you say this, but you don't actually ever do anything. There's no presence there. And again, it's not that somebody has to do something specifically to prove that they love you, or that they have to like give you something or anything like that, but there's something about the physical presence of actually being, of like where someone or something is located, that becomes so significant. And I find that love, especially in this last week of Advent, and as we're just a few days away from Christmas, this is such an important word and idea for us to prepare for, because again, God showed God's great love for us in this great miracle, that the God, the Almighty King of the universe, came down and became a baby in a manger. And yes, we can talk Trinitarian thought all day long. We can talk about Father, Son, and Spirit and how those are all interrelated, but the fact of the incarnation of Christ remains for us people of faith. The God of the universe expressed God's love for us by becoming a baby in a manger. But the idea of presence, I think, is also coupled with another idea that is so incredibly crucial. And it's something that I feel like this John passage really does a good job of getting out. And so I want to read just these two verses again. By this, the love of God was revealed in us, that God sent his only son into the world so that we may live through him. That's what we celebrate at Christmas, right? We celebrate that God sent his only son. God, in God's divine self, somehow entered into the world so that we may live through him. And that in this is love. This is verse 10. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son to be the propitiation, or the sacrifice, if you will, for our sins. And so there's this twofold meaning here, right? There's, on the one hand, you have this immanence, this being togetherness of love. But then on the other hand, you have this persistence, this staying with. And in fact, this is love, says John. It's not that we somehow loved God or that we somehow reciprocated it, but that God loved us and sent his son to be with us and then to extend so far with us that humans ultimately ended up killing him. That the systems and the structures, that the government that humans set up eventually killed and crucified the God of the universe. And there's something so powerful about that love. And yes, we usually celebrate it at Easter, but again, I think it's something that's very present with us at Christmas. Present with us at Christmas as well. It's this imminent love that is persistent. Maybe a better way to think of this idea of persistence is that this love is not fragile. It's not going to go anywhere. Like, there's nothing you can do that is somehow going to break this love, right? Now, yes, there are like certain ways to be a good covenant partner and not be a good covenant partner, but the whole point of this covenant is that the love is there. The covenant is symbolic of the love that is there, and it's in place to help both parties thrive inside of it. And this idea of persistence, this idea of love not being fragile, again, I think is so crucial, and it's so paradoxical to the way that we understand Jesus, right? Because we think of the infinite God and all of God's being awesomeness, maybe even invincibleness, coming down and living among us, but also taking on a vulnerability, being willing to die in the flesh. But yet that somehow points us to the invulnerability of the love of God. And this is just like, I could go back and forth with this all day, because this is it, right? This is what we prepare ourselves for. This is why we come to hear these messages. I hope that's why we come to hear these messages, like this message of love, this preparation even for this idea of love that is shown at Christmas is so vital, and it's so crucial that we hang on to and that we understand. And I think for this morning, that's where I want to leave us, and that's where I want to leave you with these thoughts on love. Because what we're going to do as we move forward into the sermon is we're going to take this idea of love, and I'll probably talk a little bit about what we talked about in Sunday school this morning, but I want to take it and I want to say, okay, if love is imminent, but if it's also persistent, if it's with us, yet also not fragile, then what does that actually look like for people, right? When we hear about the coming of Jesus, when we hear about the story of his birth, when the passage that we're going to look at this morning, when we hear about Mary's song that she sings, which, is super powerful in and of itself, how does that reflect this kind of love for us? What does that have to say to us about love? And so I encourage you to think about some of these things. If you want to get an early jump and you want to read through the sermon text, by all means, you're welcome to do that. Definitely would be very happy for you to do that. But sit with this thought a little bit, pray through this thought a little bit, maybe do a spiritual practice around this idea of love. And let's be prepared this week and moving into Christmas Eve to celebrate the birth of this invincible love together. I hope to see you really soon for our service. And again, just remember all the things that we have going on. It's good to be with you here this morning. Have a good couple of weeks off of Sunday school. I know that I will miss you greatly, but we hope to see you really soon for worship. Thanks. Bye.